Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and let me echo the thanks that have been given round the Chamber to Margaret for giving us the opportunity to talk about this important subject. And let me also thank Margaret for explaining why red matters. She is wearing a red jacket, and I see that many of our visitors similarly are wearing a red jacket. I now know that red is the colour most easily seen by people with some residual eyesight. So next time I'm engaged in a deafblind activity, I may seek at least to wear a red tie. And Charlie should not believe it means any more than it means. There's no political implication, Presiding Officer, were I to do so. Margaret and I think Jim made reference to the drama that there was, I think, in Committee Room 5 this afternoon. I'm afraid I was aware of the meeting, but ministerial duties did not permit me to join you. But certainly by the accounts, those who visited us in Parliament today took an excellent opportunity to make sure that we are aware of the issues that affect deaf-blind people. And let me just concede right at the outset that I think without this debate it would not have really come into my in-tray in any significant way. Thus far, it probably has not. There's been some question about numbers. Let me merely say to Ms Scanlon that the Minister is a polymath but not yet an omnimath, and therefore I do not in fact, of course, have the exact number. I think the number that Margaret Mitchell came up with of registered just under 3,000, but quite reasonably pointed that since local authorities are merely recommended to look for appropriate people in this category, there can be little doubt it would be an understatement. I do undertake to consider further whether we can do something on that, to make sure that we have an accurate and helpful factual basis of the issue and the number of people who are affected by the issue. Cathy Craigie quite properly said that elastic is not part of the budgetary process. She is, of course, correct. But at the end of the day, in politics, we make choices. We can never spend money on everything that we wish to. We have to choose where we can. Nigel Dawn made the very reasonable point that travel can be difficult for those of us with no impairments when the weather is poor. And therefore, that illustrates the kind of difficulties that there are for people in every day in their travelling life, and I absolutely accept that. He did make the point of the £15 ticket. I may say when you reach 60, Nigel, you can also buy at your own expense a further ticket that gets you a third off and another £2 off that 15 ticket to take it to £13. Interestingly enough, that is actually a wholly commercial offering by the rail companies. There's no public money involved in the provision of that ticket at all, which I think this year the offer is extending for some 3 months, maybe slightly longer. So there certainly is scope for the rail companies to consider how to bring more people to the railways without actually or necessarily involving public money. Mary Scanlon, I think made reference to there being 4 schemes. My notes would suggest there are currently 15 schemes that are supporting blind people on the rail network. There were previously 16. They are variable schemes with different ranges of offerings, but they do include, for example, of interest to Ms Scanlon, Highland. Has a scheme, as does Lothians, and SPT, who cover, of course, a significant number of local authority areas. I am somewhat aware of the mental health issues for the deaf-blind. Members will have heard me talk before of a period 45 years ago, I hasten to add, when I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and one of our patients was a deaf-blind patient, but they had a range of more severe problems. So I certainly was aware in that respect. The other thing I would just say is that many of the schemes do actually, as I think Angela Constance made clear, provide benefits beyond the council boundary in question. Charlie Gordon made an important point when he said some parts of Scotland have few bus services. And I think that leads on to something that I do want to try and say, and that is, of course, why should it be local authorities who provide this kind of support rather than central government? And I think part of the answer is that actually local travel varies in different local authority areas. My own constituency, as members have heard me say before, has no trains. So therefore a train benefit is not of much use to people in my constituency. Some, but not much. When we go to the islands, it's often more important perhaps to have supported ferry travel, and indeed in the islands as well. Some people commute by aircraft. They go from the Outer Isles in Orkney to Kirkwall for the shopping once a week by aircraft. So I think that points to why there is a sense in why local delivery and local decision making can make a great deal of sense. Charlie Gordon suggested I convene a meeting of stakeholders. I will certainly go and consider that further, because I do want to be seen to be taking the subject seriously. I make the general point that Deafblind Scotland recently raised the whole issue that we're talking about with the Scottish Rail Accessibility Forum, and my officials from Transport Scotland are currently engaging with local authorities regarding consistency of approach and considering the provision of discounted rail travel for blind passenger companions. So I think there is some work going on. I will certainly keep on top of it, and if we can see that it will make a real difference, then I will certainly consider picking up the point that Charlie Gordon made. I think we have in our Scotland-wide free bus travel scheme got something which is pretty widely recognised as delivering a huge benefit. I have to say to you it is a very significant cost to the public purse that presents its own challenges, but it delivers a huge benefit. Let me just conclude by saying that I had the pleasure and privilege of being invited by the Grampian Society for the Blind, I think probably 3 years ago, before the last election, to attend a blind driving day, when, blindfolded, I was then invited to drive a car around a racetrack. And of course, to do that, you had to have someone sitting beside you, fulfilling precisely the sort of support in that very temporary handicap that was inflicted upon me, to see how difficult it was. And even with that assistance, it was a very substantially challenging undertaking. With that help, with a trained person helping to do that. So please be absolutely aware that I do have some limited insight from personal experience of the difficulties that are experienced by people with deafblind. I think the debate has given me and the government generally some considerable food for thought. Given that Mary Scanlon said she would talk to health ministers directly, I will not pick up the points that presiding officer allowed you to make on that subject, but I think it's been a very useful debate. I thank once again for the opportunity of debating this important subject. Presiding officer.
I now close this meeting.